Since the beginning of World War I, there have been over 1 million victims affected by chemical warfare, and hundreds of thousands have ended in fatality. The human race has been using weapons to fight or defend against an enemy for thousands of years. In the beginning, it was most likely due to protecting a food plot from a rival clan, or perhaps using force to gain access to more secure living conditions. In more recent times, it seems to be over religious beliefs, ethnic differences, and territorial disputes. Although chemical weapons have only been used in modern times, we have finally closed that chapter of our history of warfare. Or have we? Join me for a deep dive into the history and my personal experience with some of the most complex and devastating weapons ever designed. In the fall of 1993, I joined the U.S. Army and shipped out to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. Only 2 years had passed since the end of the First Gulf War in 1991, where the threat of a chemical attack was at an all-time high. As a new soldier in the new era of high-tech war machines and technology, I was about to experience firsthand what it's like to train for and react to sophisticated chemical attacks. To understand the complexity and importance of continued research, equipment, and training for the ever-existing threat of chemical warfare, not only on the battlefield, but anywhere at any time, let's do a deeper exploration of the history, training techniques, and my personal experiences related to chemical warfare. In the year 429 BC, during the Peloponnesian War, a woodpile was covered in pitch and sulfur, then ignited. These chemicals created blue flames and a foul stench that released toxic sulfur dioxide gas over the defenders, and the Athenians soon abandoned their posts. Now, the Spartans could easily move in and gain a strategic advantage. In the late 15th century, Spanish conquistadors encountered a rudimentary type of chemical warfare on the island of Hispaniola. The Spaniards were bombarded with gourds filled with ashes and ground hot peppers. These projectiles created a blinding smokescreen that allowed the Taino army to launch their attack. For over a century, military forces all over the world have been designing, producing, and training for the use of chemical weapons. Once these horrific and devastating weapons of battle were used in the early 1900s during World War I, the race to be the leader in this industry had begun. In the United States, as well as several other countries, our military trains year-round in defensive tactics in case of a chemical attack. These attacks can come in the form of chemical, biological, radiological, and also nuclear agents. Therefore, it is critical that our service members have access to the best equipment and training to effectively be able to carry out their missions even in the harshest environments. The first large-scale use of chemical weapons in modern history dates back to April 22, 1915, when Germany used chlorine against their enemies during World War I. Chlorine gas was created by German chemist Fritz Haber. During the war, Haber designed and helped coordinate the gas attack in Belgium. Ironically, this man would later go on to win the Nobel Peace Prize for his invention of what would become modern-day fertilizer. Because of this revolutionary chemical supplement that was designed to help increase food production, the agricultural benefits are still being used today. Chlorine gas produces a greenish yellow cloud that smells of bleach and immediately irritates the eyes, nose, throat, and lungs of anyone that's exposed to it. At high enough doses, it can kill by asphyxiation. Another gas used during this time period was phosgene. This colorless gas that smells like moldy hay was much more stealthy, and by the time soldiers knew they had been exposed a few days later, they would slowly suffocate and most likely not survive. 85% of World War I chemical fatalities were due to phosgene. Because of this new threat to our military and national security, the Department of the Army created a new headquarters specifically designed for chemical weapons testing and defense against such gas attacks that had claimed the lives of so many soldiers. Edgewood Chemical and Biological Center, located in Maryland, was created in 1917 and has protected the United States from the threat of chemical weapons ever since. In the summer of 1917, the first use of the next breakthrough chemical weapon was unleashed: mustard gas. Mustard gas has a potent smell. Some have said it reeks of garlic, gasoline, rubber, and even dead horses. If exposed to this gas, the symptoms would come about within several hours of exposure, leaving painful bloodshot eyes, burning blisters, and could even cause blindness. During this time period of uncertainty, the military was forced to train and develop countermeasures to sustain mission readiness even during a chemical attack. Gas masks were designed, tested, and mass-produced. And not just for soldiers, but for civilians, and also horses, as they were the main mode of transportation in those days. Soldiers would train in real-life scenarios to don their protective masks and then don a special-made gas mask for their horse or mule. The military created mass confidence chambers where they would be exposed to chlorine and sometimes mace. Soldiers would get to experience and see firsthand that if they donned and cleared their masks properly, they would not suffer the effects of these agents. Although the chemicals have changed over the years, this type of training still exists today. The League of Nations adopts the Geneva Protocol. This treaty was signed on June 17, 1925. This would ban the use of all kinds of poisonous gases during times of war. However, it did not prohibit the production of such weapons. Many of the parties to the Geneva Protocol reserved the right to retaliate in kind if chemical or biological weapons should ever be used against them. For the next few decades, new chemical weapons continued to be developed, produced, and stockpiled around the world. The U.S. built several chemical weapons storage facilities throughout the country, one of those being the Umatilla Chemical Depot, located in northeastern Oregon alongside the Columbia River. Constructed in 1941, this was an ideal location for the 20,000-acre plot. It was close to a river port and railroad system, which made it ideal for importing and exporting weapons. At one time, this chemical storage facility stored 12% of the chemical weapons in America's arsenal. As the years went on, and prior to the Vietnam War, scientists, chemists, and high-ranking military personnel continued to experiment on potentially new ways to use chemicals and agents against their enemies. Starting in 1955 and continuing for about 20 years, certain top-secret experiments were being conducted on animals and U.S. Army soldiers at the Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. In one experiment, scientists would give lysergic acid diethylamide, otherwise known as LSD, to a cat and observe its behavior while being exposed to mice. They noticed it seemed very confused and not acting like itself, as if it was having trouble focusing on the mice, and also seemed scared. LSD is a psychedelic drug, and its effects will typically include intensified thoughts, emotions, and sensory perception. In higher doses, this drug can cause mental, visual, and auditory hallucinations. The next set of tests were done on healthy soldiers. These troops were not told what they were given and did not know what the effects would be. They would be given a dose of LSD in groups and then observed as to the effects over the course of several hours. At first, the sergeants would lead them in marching drills and check on their reaction time and also their military bearing. Before the drug would fully set in, the soldiers appeared to be normal, but after a few hours, you could see that the acid was starting to take a toll on their mental state. They would lose focus and not be able to stay in sync. They would also start to laugh during times that normally one would not find any humor. Some would say they even felt incapacitated and that everything appeared to be moving. Another chemical drug that was tested on American troops was phencyclidine, or more commonly referred to as PCP. This drug would give the soldier a sense of feeling no pain, fatigue, or weakness.
How do you feel?
I feel pretty good, sir.
Do you? Are you cold?
No, I'm not cold at all.
You tired?
No, I'm not tired. Well, I could run.
Could do some more, could you?
Yes, sir. I could run. I run 100 miles right now.
Is that right?
That's right.
Pretty pepped up, huh?
Uh-huh. I run through it, and now I feel good, and I'm not tired, and I can run through it again. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Pardon me. Go ahead.
These mind-altering drugs never materialized as a chemical weapon, but nonetheless, this sort of experimenting and testing continued for years. Since World War I, the Army has been using what they called mass confidence chambers. These gas chambers would allow the soldiers to experience the use of their masks in a controlled, contaminated environment. In the beginning of the 1960s, the Army also made a significant change to the gas chamber by changing the type of gas used from chlorine or mace to what they still use today, CS gas.
CS is used. Exposure to an amount as low as 1 part per million produces almost immediate effect.
They discovered that CS super tear gas to be ideal, since it would not only produce tears, it would also induce vomiting. The military symbol CS was derived to honor the 2 American chemists that had first synthesized the chemical in 1928, B.B. Carson and R.W. Stratton. While the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War peaked in April of 1969, with over 543,000 combat troops stationed there, there was a new chemical weapon being used on the Viet Cong: napalm. Napalm is a mixture of chemicals designed to create a highly flammable and gelatinous liquid. The firebomb fuel gels were used for its tactical and psychological effects. One significant advantage of a chemical attack versus the traditional bullet, bomb, projectile, or missile was the fact that the potential victim would not be killed immediately. In fact, a lot of soldiers exposed to chemicals or poison gas survived, but not without significant support from others. For every contaminated person, it would take at least one other person to treat or care for that patient. This strategy would help exhaust the enemy's manpower, thus creating less of a threat. Agent Orange was another use of chemical warfare during Vietnam and was in the form of a fine liquid or spray. This agent got its name from the orange-labeled containers the herbicide was shipped in. It is colorless and clear, thus making it hard for detection before one becomes exposed. By the time the U.S. retreated from the Vietnam War in 1975, over 58,000 troops lost their lives. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, Iraq uses chemical weapons, including Taban, against Iraq and Iraqi's Kurdish minority. Taban, or sometimes referred to as taboo, is a clear, colorless, and tasteless liquid with a faint, fruity odor. This chemical is classified as a nerve agent because it can fatally interfere with normal functioning of the nervous system. The United Nations confirms the use of chemical weapons by the Iraqis, but there is little international outcry from the rest of the world. On August 2nd of 1990, Iraq invades its neighboring country of Kuwait, and the United States, along with several allies, quickly deployed troops and equipment to the area. After several months of no retreat from the Iraqis, a lethal force of 600,000 U.S. troops began the offensive known as Operation Desert Storm. This began with severe air attacks, and eventually ground troops swarmed the desert. The main threat that the troops faced at that time was a chemical attack. These chemicals, gases, and nerve agents could come in the form of Taban, VX, sarin, cyclosarin, and mustard. Fortunately, none of those were used during that war, but the threat remained at the highest of levels throughout the engagement. After about 43 days, what was left of the Iraqi army had surrendered and the war was declared over. On the 13th of January 1993, with over 100 nations signing in the first 2 days, the Chemical Weapons Convention opened in Paris. This treaty was an agreement that bans all chemical weapons and requires that by a certain date, the existing chemical weapons be destroyed. The original dates on some of the weapons' destruction had to get pushed back due to challenges on designing a safe way to decommission these toxic chemicals and gases. But the starting date for this process was to begin in April of 1997. When I first arrived at Fort Leonard Wood, I was ready to take on the world. I did everything I could to prepare myself for the hardships of basic training. I was in good shape. I already learned the military alphabet in time. I had watched Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Rambo, and all the Hollywood classics. But there was one part of this chapter of my military career that you can't train for.
Seal your protective mask.
The gas chamber.
Down, re-clear, and reseal your protective mask.
On that day that we all dreaded, but were also excited to get behind us, I happened to be in the front of formation when we arrived at the gas chamber. The drill sergeant grabbed about 6 of us and made us don our masks and move to the exit door. We were instructed to help guide the rest of the recruits out of the gas chamber when they came out of that door. So before I had the pleasure of going through, I had to watch the rest of the company one by one come out that door, gagging, puking, and gasping for breath, while I eagerly awaited my turn at this frightening experience. Once you have successfully shown that you can break the seal on your mask, replace and clear it, the drill sergeants order you to completely remove it and breathe in the CS gas while trying to keep your eyes open. The first breath feels about like what I can imagine it feel if someone hit you in the chest with a sledgehammer. Your eyes and skin burn, and your sinuses drain all the mucus in your body almost instantaneously. You can hear the voice on the intercom explaining what to do, but your body and mind have a hard time focusing due to the excruciating pain you're experiencing. If you try and hold your breath to avoid the gas, you will eventually regret it. They will keep all of you in there long enough you will have to breathe, and now your body is already going to be out of oxygen, and your first inhale will be a big one, thus a more painful breath. The intention here is so you'll remember what this feels like, so in the event of a real gas attack, you will react swiftly in donning your mask before it's too late. Once the drill sergeants are satisfied with everyone's performance, they will let you out of the chamber. As you enter the outside world, you are instructed to keep your arms out to the side, keep your eyes open, and keep walking. This helps dissipate the gas away from your uniform and skin. After about 5 minutes, the gas wears off and you start to feel normal again. I'll always remember that experience as though it were yesterday. After 2 years of active duty and 9 in the Oregon Army National Guard, I got my honorable discharge and returned to full-time civilian life. During those years, the U.S. was involved in 2 major conflicts and a handful of smaller worldwide operations. Luckily, none of which involved chemical warfare, even though the threat was real and the preparation was continuous. Since the chemical weapons destruction was agreed upon, the U.S. turned its storage sites into disposal sites with complete renovations to build incinerators and safe disposal facilities. This process would take years.
The US is closing a dark chapter in the history of warfare.
Big story, a milestone, decades in the making.
And the United States has destroyed the last batch of chemical weapons dating back to World War I.
Came to fruition this afternoon.
The last of the United States chemical weapon arsenal.
These rockets filled with the GB nerve agent, also known as sarin,
Was finally destroyed right here in Kentucky.
Workers have destroyed the last of its declared chemical weapons. Military experts say this sends a powerful message to other countries.
Now that America's stockpile has been destroyed, and those sites will become museums, training sites, and even wildlife refuges, the military can now turn its focus to other threats. Or can it? Is chemical warfare a thing of the past, or has it turned into something more dangerous and sinister? I'm sure we can all agree that destroying the stockpiles of mustard gas, phosgene, VX, sarin, and all deadly chemical weapons is a benefit to humanity and the planet. But should we as a country and a military keep a vigilant eye on the future and constantly try and be one step ahead of technology and tactics to ensure our continued safety in a world full of uncertainties and the unexpected? Only time will tell. Hello everyone, thank you for watching my video. I sure appreciate it. Please leave a comment below, let me know what you think. Until the next time, be safe out there. We'll see you again.